First on our list, the 2020 election. How could we not? Washington's only been counting down to this season for like 3 years now. So I want to specifically take a look at the Democratic primary. This past month, we saw a primary, a caucus, and a disastrous one, if I may add, 2 debates, and we saw the race drop from 12 to 8 candidates. There's been no lack of excitement, that's for sure. Mayor Pete Buttigieg brought in the most delegates in Iowa, 13, followed close behind by Senator Bernie Sanders with 12, and Senator Elizabeth Warren with 8. However, when it came to the popular vote, Senator Sanders did pull ahead by a little over 2,000 votes. 1 week later, in New Hampshire, Sanders and Buttigieg tied for delegates at 9. Sanders did, however, win the popular vote. But in a surprising turn of events, Senator Amy Klobuchar came in third, securing 6 delegates. So now, here we are. We're less than 2 weeks away from Super Tuesday, when a large chunk of delegates will be up for grabs. Yet, the candidates are fighting as fierce as ever on the debate stage. There's so much to talk about, so let's get started. First, I want to talk about the current state of the Democratic Party. It seems like the only thing that these candidates can really agree on these days is the fact that they want to take Donald Trump out of the White House. But speaking of that guy, he has a pretty clear shot to the Republican nomination. Many states are canceling their Republican primaries. He's not really having any fierce challengers. But the Democrats are still being as fierce as ever on the debate stage, attacking each other on Twitter. So the question I want to ask right now is, I get that the Democratic Party is a big tent party. It has a lot of different views. But do you think that this infighting will actually hurt them in the end? Sam, we'll go to you first.
Well, I think it's just a little bit too much to try and talk about how infighting could really hurt the party at the moment. It's good to see that there is a rigorous and very hard primary that the Democrats are getting through. I think that's the right way to really find the right person to nominate, to represent our party and find really the best person to take on Donald Trump. We've moved on from 2016 and understood that, there are a lot of issues that, brought Secretary Clinton to the nomination, and there were concerns about how Senator Sanders was stymied in that process. But I think now we have a very diverse field of candidates, and as much as the media wants to pander to the thinking that there's this giant fight, I think that Democrats will unite behind an eventual nominee.
Republicans, do you think that your counterparts are having too much infighting? You think it's hurting them?
Yeah. Infighting always hurts a candidate in the general. I think you'd be naive to say otherwise. And by the way, if you want to say that, you'll unite around each other in the end, look at Nevada. Your candidates were this close to a fistfight on the stage. And not only that, according to Nate Silver and 538, there's a 42% chance, according to him, that it goes to a contested convention, the first one since the 1950s.
So we're going to get to the contested convention in a little bit. We're going to talk about that.
You guys are going to tear each other apart, and it always hurts your candidate at the end because Trump is breezing through. He's not being hit by anyone, and he won't be hit by anyone. Meanwhile, you guys are doing Trump's opposition research for him.
Now, I want to ask a question specifically about that debate in Nevada that you spoke about. Pete Buttigieg, he launched a pretty lengthy attack on Senator Sanders and Mayor Bloomberg before saying this, quote, "Let's put forward somebody who actually lives and works in a middle-class neighborhood, in an industrial Midwestern city. Let's put forward someone who's actually a Democrat." So he said that. Senator Sanders is self-proclaimed Democratic socialist. Mayor Bloomberg's had this indecisiveness with his party since 2001. He only just became a Democrat again in 2018. Do you think that Sanders and Bloomberg are a little out of touch with the Democratic Party? Republicans, what do you think?
I mean, yeah, I do think, especially if what the Democrats are looking for is somebody to represent the party well. I don't know if Sanders and Bloomberg are either of them are that person, but I do think. I don't know if Pete Buttigieg really has that capacity either to be the person that represents the Democratic Party in the future.
So I want to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
Senator Sanders, he's the perceived front runner right now.
Yeah.
Mayor Bloomberg is polling in double digits in several polls. Democrats, is he too out of touch with your party? Are these people the ones who you think can really lead the party?
Yeah. So I definitely think that there is a growing divide in the Democratic Party that we have to acknowledge. And Mayor Bloomberg definitely is not going in the direction of where we're going, kind of towards the views kind of more like Senator Sanders has towards the left a bit. But because this party we're kind of refiguring ourselves out, I don't know who's going to best represent what we're.
Do you think Sanders and Bloomberg do represent it, though?
I don't think Bloomberg does. I think he's out of touch. He's in the past. He's not even really a Democrat, so definitely not. And Sanders definitely at least represents where the party is going with like all of the youth that's coming up, and that's where his strong support comes from.
You know, even beyond the Democratic Party, I think actually it hasn't as much been talked about. I think Buttigieg had the line of the night in Nevada when he said that many Americans will find themselves without a place to look if they're forced to choose in the Democratic Party between a socialist who thinks that capitalism is the root of all evil, referring to Sanders, and a billionaire who thinks that money should be the root of all power, referring to Bloomberg. And I think that even beyond that, the fact is that neither Sanders nor really Bloomberg, in my opinion, more Bloomberg, but neither Sanders nor Bloomberg really represents the average American voter. And I think that if you look at the Democratic Party, maybe it's time to start questioning whether or not certain members of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party are out of touch with what most Americans want.
You know, I have to disagree and just note that the importance of what's going on in the primary process now and what Senator Sanders especially is highlighting is, you know, whether you want to call him a socialist or not, he's pointing out that there's obvious corruption, greed in our American political system. And, you know, the candidates will all say that to a different degree, but that's something that we can all unite around, is understanding that, you know, the corruption, the greed, the dark money that's been in politics, that really Senator McConnell, the Senate Republicans, the president has no interest in trying to reform and trying to fix.
And that's fair, and that's a fair perspective, but do you think that the entire Democratic Party is there? Do you think the entire Democratic Party is ready to get on board with these highly progressive leftist ideals?
I do. I think that if a progressive candidate is nominated, and I think, you know, all of them, aside from maybe, you know, Congresswoman Gabbard or even Mayor Bloomberg, will all label themselves as progressives. It's the degree of how progressive you want to enact those solutions.
I think Biden raised a very interesting point when he pointed out that having Sanders at the top of the ticket could harm Democrats elsewhere. And I'll tell you why, and he raised this point, and I think it's actually really interesting, is that you're going to force Democrats down ticket, many of whom don't support socialism, or don't support the very progressive policies of Senator Sanders. You're going to force them to take a stance, and you're going to have them either support socialism, which might not be popular in their district, or actively go against their nominee. I think it could put the Democrats down ticket in a very tough position. Beyond that, there was a poll done. 45% of people said that they would vote for a socialist, 53% of people said that they would not, 23% of independents said that they support socialism and have a favorable view of it.
Now for Warren, she's had quite the interesting campaign. First two races didn't exactly go as she had planned, coming in third in Iowa, fourth in New Hampshire, finish that didn't even earn her any delegates. It's still early, but she is in third place in the delegate count. She did, however, like you all were saying, have a really strong performance in this debate. Do you think that, considering this recent lag in the first two races, do you think that that's going to damage her campaign and her campaign for the presidency? Or do you think that this boost from the debate, she did bring in her best hour of fundraising during that debate, do you think this will be enough to sort of propel her back into the race?
Absolutely not. I think that it's important to understand that she really is the great debater that she's proven herself to be time and time again. I don't think she really has ever had a bad debate performance. You know, that's kind of been immortalized in her, you know, time way back in Oklahoma City as a high schooler. I think she has fantastic potential, especially with Super Tuesday. You know, everyone really wants to talk about how, you know, momentum can carry, but let's keep in mind we're on the eve of only the third nominating contest.
I do think it's pretty early.
There's a long way to go, and I think there's a lot of room for any candidate, really. It is anyone's game.
Republicans, does does Senator Warren have a shot?
I think she definitely saved her campaign with her strong performance. After New Hampshire, I think I was saying that she's probably close to done. She was really fighting for the niche that Sanders is currently occupying. She was, at the end of the day, I believe that this will really come down to one or two progressives and probably one or two moderates. And I think that she was showing that Sanders was beating her all over the place for that progressive slot.
I do think that Elizabeth Warren is going to have to start appealing to like the more suburban mom like base of Klobuchar instead of like the progressive Bernie supporters, because I think Bernie kind of has his supporters locked in.
They're also going to
And-
have to start pushing into each other's coalitions, because you can't win the nomination with only a little less than half of the caucus. I mean, the parties essentially
so
two
I think
parties
that
right now.
she definitely showed that she's not out of it. I think it will really, she needs to have strong performances in either Nevada or South Carolina. If she doesn't have strong performances there, I think no matter how well she does in the debates, people, when it comes to Super Tuesday, won't view her as a viable candidate. I do think she needs to have a strong performance, a top 3 performance in either state. But I think that with this debate, and with, as you said, she's a very strong debater. So, and with the other debate coming up on February 25th, I think she needs to either make a top 3 or put in another strong performance in the February 25th debate. But she is currently fighting for the campaign to stay alive.
All right, let's move on to the next candidate I want to talk about, Senator Klobuchar, who's been a bit of an anomaly this campaign season. She sort of ran under the radar during the campaign season, but then she came out in 3rd place in New Hampshire, which was a stunning finish for her campaign, and she's been pretty fiery in these recent debates. So her campaign is saying that she has clomentum. So, do you think that this clomentum will continue? Do you think that Senator Klobuchar has a viable path to the nomination? Democrats, I'll throw to you first.
Unfortunately, I don't think she does. She polls terribly with African American voters. Coming up to South Carolina and even in Nevada, people of color are actually going to be represented this time, as they weren't in Iowa and New Hampshire. So I don't really think that she has, without that coalition, I don't think she has a reasonable path to the nomination.
So I want to just come back with a question there.
Yeah.
You say that you don't think she has a viable path because of her lack in African American support. I think that same theory translates for Mayor Buttigieg.
Yes.
He's notorious for polling terribly.
She polls worse than he does, which is not, that's really bad.
But if one of them, if Mayor Buttigieg or Senator Klobuchar do end up getting the nomination, the big pull towards them is that Midwestern appeal, being able to appeal to those states that, you know, President Trump was able to take from Secretary Clinton in the 2016 election. But the same thing can be said for Senator Sanders, who in the 2016 primary absolutely walloped Secretary Clinton in states like Wisconsin.
Republicans, do you think Klobuchar has a viable spot on a viable path to the ticket, and what do you think her campaign should be focusing on?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I do think that she still has a little bit of a viable shot at getting the nomination. I think there's like not very many moderate candidates, or at least I think we'll start seeing a shift towards that, because I really think that the Democrats' main goal in their voting is going to be like who is going to beat Donald Trump, and I really don't think that they think that like a socialist progressive is going to be the one that's going to be like win over the whole country in the general election.
There are still, though, a lot of moderates in the lane, but
Because of that, I have to disagree. I don't think she has a viable shot to the top of the ticket. And if you look at the viable candidates, they are all white, and I feel like a white Democrat is more likely than not going to take a minority as their VP choice. So I can't see her getting onto the ticket. However, what I do see is I do think that she will more likely than not, if she continues to have a strong performance, manage to leverage her way into maybe a cabinet spot, a sub-cabinet spot, if she wants it.
all right.
She might not want it.
I want to
if she
move on
wants
to the last question. We are kind of teetering this a little bit at the top of the block. How the Democratic Party runs their primary season and runs their caucuses. They have a really interesting way of putting their candidates to the ticket. What I want to talk about is those superdelegates, because we right now are talking about the possibility of a contested convention. At that Wednesday Nevada debate, that notorious debate everyone's talking about, the question was asked, do you support superdelegates? What do you think of this system? All of the candidates on stage said let the process play out. If that means superdelegates, okay, except for Senator Sanders. We can also mention his 2016 finish and how superdelegates affected him 4 years ago then. So what I want to ask you guys is, do you think that superdelegates should remain in the system for putting a Democrat to the nomination? Democrats, it's your party. We'll let you give the first talk.
You know, I think the way that the Democrats are able to reform the process in the past 4 years, I think, is on the right path. And really, I think the superdelegates should be a mode of last resort. And I do believe that the DNC is utilizing that in a way by, it's been a long time since we've had to go into a contested convention. We were talking about, what was it, 1954? Two. Was the last contested convention. Of course, it would be wonderful for all of us to be able to view that and understand how significant that is for
good
political
television.
history. Exactly. But I also think, again, it's just so early to talk about contested conventions. It's a realistic possibility. But I think, having those 500 superdelegates in play, that's the voice, the higher echelon of the party that really will be working with whoever the nominee is going to be and if they end up beating Trump to the White House. So I think, letting the process play out will be the good option, but also considering that the will of the people is the most important thing. That's where the DNC really has to get going.
Republicans will give you the last word.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Bernie would say that he doesn't support super delegates. We saw in 2016, and he knows that the party upper echelon doesn't like him very much. They don't necessarily fall within his progressive ideology. And I believe that if it goes to a contested convention, absolutely the party elites, the head of the DNC, will be working behind the scenes to try to make sure a more moderate candidate ends up with a nomination.
All right, we'll have to end the 2020 conversation there. We can keep going for hours, I know, but we got to move on. After this, we'll head over to the Department of Justice to see what's going on inside and take a closer look at the mythical Roger Stone. Stay tuned.